Hi, and welcome to this week's Healing Journey, Environmental Triggers and the Science of Cue Exposure. This month, we're shifting focus from what we eat to where we live and how our physical and emotional environments can either support or sabotage our recovery. When people come into recovery from processed foods, they're often focused on changing their meals. But what we're beginning to understand through both science and lived experience is that the space around us plays just as big a role as the food itself. Your environment is not neutral. It's either cueing your cravings or supporting your calm. So this week, we'll talk about the science behind cue-induced cravings, why certain spaces make recovery harder, how to create even small shifts that help your brain relax, and how your parts react to these changes, and how to work with them and not against them. But first, let me share a personal story. I want to start with something personal because this isn't just theory for me. There was a time in my life when the hardest part of the day wasn't the workday itself. It was coming home from it. On the outside, I had it together. I was capable. I handled my responsibilities well. I kept up with the world around me. But inside, I was barely holding on by the time I walked through that front door. I had this ritual, and at the time, I wouldn't have even called it that. It just was. Every evening, I'd come home, pour a glass of red wine, and head to my chair. It was always the same chair in the sunroom where the light came in just right, or maybe even out on the porch in the warmer months where I could hear the world quiet down. I'd settle in, glass in hand, and let the tension drain out of me sip by sip. It wasn't about the wine. It was about the space. That chair meant you're off duty now. It meant I could stop pretending, stop performing, just for a little while. Looking back, I can see so clearly how powerful that environment was. It wasn't just a house, it was a cue system. The chair, the time of day, the muscle memory of how I moved through the evening, it all worked together to trigger a craving for relief. And here's the thing, my craving wasn't wrong. I did need relief. I did need transition, but I didn't yet know how to give myself that in a way that actually restored me. I share this because I know so many of us have these kinds of rituals. Maybe it's not wine for you. Maybe it's a certain food, a show, a couch, a drawer, a drive-through, a moment where everything says, now, this is when we cope. But what if the cue isn't the problem? What if it's only the language your nervous system learned to speak? That's what we're exploring this week, not how to control ourselves, but how to understand what's been cueing our craving and how to offer ourselves something deeper than just the routine. This isn't about shame, it's about seeing and beginning gently to shift the environment inside and out. Now let's talk about the science. Cravings don't come out of nowhere. They're often triggered by external cues, sights, smells, objects, routines, places, or people that have been linked in your brain to the relief that food once brought. This is called cue-induced craving, and it's well documented in neuroscience. Research using fMRI scans have shown that even the sight of a branded snack or fast food logo can light up the brain's amygdala, which is responsible for our emotional memory, the hippocampus, which is responsible for contextual memory, and the nucleus accumbens, which is responsible for the anticipation of reward. These same areas are activated in people recovering from substance use when they're exposed to drug-related cues. In other words, your craving might not be a sign of hunger at all. It's your brain reacting to a learned association. I see this, therefore I want relief. These cues can be visual, the color of a box, a certain container, a counter where you used to snack. They can be contextual, like a time of day, like after dinner, or a location, like the car. It can be relational, like a person who always brought over treats, or a friend you always ate with. These learned associations are part of what researchers call classical conditioning, the same process Pavlov used with his dogs. Only here, it's not a bell, it's your pantry, it's your couch, or the sound of a crinkly wrapper. Now, let's layer in the nervous system. When a cue is detected, it doesn't just trigger desire. It can trigger a stress response, especially if there is an internal part of you that believes the food is the only way to soothe or survive. The body may go into hyperarousal, like heart racing or an urge to act quickly, or disassociation, numbing, or zoning out. This isn't because you're out of control. It's because your system is activating a survival response to a perceived emotional threat. The brain says, this food helped me before. I need it again. Even if your thinking mind disagrees, the emotional brain has already lit up. But here's the good news. The brain can unlearn these cue responses. This is called cue extinction. And it happens when a trigger is encountered but not followed by the expected reward. For example, if you walk into your kitchen, see the counter where you used to grab snacks, but instead pause, breathe, and engage in a different routine, your brain starts to weaken the association. It says, oh, that's not what happens here anymore. The more consistently you disrupt the cue reward loop, the less intense the cravings become. This doesn't mean you need to get rid of everything. In fact, too much change at once can overwhelm your system. Start small. Cue extinction works best with gradual adjustments, repeated exposure to the cue without reinforcement, emotional support while the craving is surfacing. This is why we bring in IFS parts work. Let's focus on one very specific kind of part this week, a protector that reacts urgently when a cue in your environment shows up. This might be a drawer in the kitchen, a routine like TV after dinner, the car, the couch, a certain friend, or even something subtle like a smell or a time of day. This protector doesn't wait. It leaps forward with a sense of panic or urgency, and it pushes you toward food or sometimes distraction or numbing, because that's what it's learned will bring relief. Rather than pushing this part away or analyzing it from a distance, we use IFS process to really get to know it. And here's how. First, we find the part. Begin by recalling a recent moment when a craving showed up in response to a trigger. Maybe you walked into your kitchen and felt the wave of, I have to eat something. Now ask inside, where do I sense this part most strongly? Is it in my chest, my stomach, my arms, my jaw? Is it a pressure, heat, motion, numbness? Try to stay with it long enough for the part to show up more fully. Next, we focus inward. Once you locate this part in your body, Gently focus your attention on it, not to interrogate, but to observe and connect with it. You might say, I'm here with you now. I want to understand what's happening. Notice what it feels like. Does it feel urgent, protective, loud, scared? Let it know you're not trying to push it away. You're just staying close and observing. Next, we flesh it out. Now begin to explore it in more detail. Ask, what does this part look like or feel like inside? Is it a shape? Do you get an image? Can you perceive an age or the energy that it has? What does it do when it reacts to that environmental cue? What is its role? Let it speak for itself, not just what you assume about it. It might say something like, I jump up and say we need to eat right now. I've got one job. Fix this feeling fast. Make this feeling go away. And you can ask, how long have you been doing this job? What would happen if you didn't do it anymore? The question often reveals everything. Now, in the next step, you're going to check how you're feeling toward this part. Do you feel annoyed, ashamed, or scared of it? Or are you starting to feel curious, appreciative, or even compassionate? If you're not feeling open or caring, ask the parts that are interfering if they'd be willing to give you space so you can really listen to this protector part. Once you feel a little more openness, tell the part, I see how hard you've been working. I want to understand what you're protecting me from. And then pause and listen deeply. Now you're going to befriend and understand your part. This is where the work goes deeper. Ask the part, what are you afraid would happen if you didn't push me toward food? What is the worst case scenario you're trying to prevent? You may discover that the part is trying to protect you from something much deeper, like a collapse into sadness, or the shame of feeling out of control, or even the fear of disappearing. Often, protectors have stepped into their role because something more vulnerable, a deeply impacted part, is carrying a pain that once overwhelmed your system. You might ask, do you remember when you first had to take on this job? Or was there a time that I really needed you? This isn't about rushing to the deeply impacted part just yet. Just honor what this protector has carried. Let it tell its story. So if you go through this process, what might happen? Well, sometimes the protector softens. You might feel a wave of emotion or even exhaustion. It's been holding this urgency for years. Other times, the protector will not let go. That's okay. You're building trust, and the goal isn't to stop the craving. It's to let the protector know that it's not alone. When your system senses that you are showing up to help, not control, not override, but to help, the urgency often starts to ease. And when you reduce the urgency, environmental cues lose some of their power. So this week, here's what I invite you to do. I invite you first to do a cue walkthrough. Choose one environment, your kitchen, your car, your workspace. It's up to you. And take a gentle inventory. What are the visual cues that are present? Are there items or spots tied to old routines? What emotions do you feel in each space? Now let's create a trigger tracker. Start noticing when cravings show up. Where are you? What time is it? What's going on? Who are you with? And then use this as data, not judgment. Next, you're going to choose one cue to shift. Start with something that is a low stake item. Let's say we move a food item out of sight. We cover a trigger with a note or object that makes you feel supported. Or you replace a routine like eating in front of the TV with another form of soothing thing like a blanket or listening to music or having a warm beverage. So I have an example of the covering the trigger with a note or object that I used early on. I used to have this habit of going into the pantry or opening the refrigerator door whenever I felt stressed. And so what I did is I put a note, a sticky note on the inside of those areas and said, the answer you're looking for is not here. And that just reminded me. It just reminded me that this is a trigger and this is something I'm working on changing. So I just offer that as, an example. Okay, the next thing I advise is to talk to your parts. When resistance or urgency shows up, pause and ask yourself, who inside is scared of this change? What do you need to feel safe? Would you be willing to try something different with me? Even one small shift can send a powerful message to your system. We're not in crisis. We're safe. We're learning something new. So in closing this week, recovery isn't just about food. It's about rewiring your relationship to the spaces and signals that used to drive the behavior. Your environment isn't just where you live, it's where your nervous system learns. This week, we slow things down. We begin to notice, to soften, and to listen. You're not being too sensitive. You're paying attention to what your body and your internal parts have been trying to tell you for a long time. And now you're creating a space that listens back. I'll see you on the live call.